Meghan is spiraling. What exactly do you mean by that? And what are your sources telling you about her mental state and the happiness of the couple?
There is tension over the children, and it's because Harry doesn't want the kids to be used. If you then start shilling them out on a weekly basis on your Instagram to sell more scented candles, it does look a bit rum. In terms of spiraling, this is someone who's very busy, extremely active in a number of different areas, and yet it's scattergun. It made her look desperate and clingy. We come back to this insistence of hers on being the victim, on how awful things have been for her. I mean, she has a momentum without direction.
Welcome back to the Royalist, everybody. It's been a long time. I've missed you. I hope you missed me. I was in America last week for the King's visit. I wasn't able to record the podcast as usual, but wow, what a trip it was. How fantastically did Charles do? I thought he got the balance completely right between being respectful to President Trump, respectful to the United States, but also making clear that he wasn't there just to be somebody's poodle or somebody's lick spittle. What did you think? Let us know in the comments below. It was an extraordinary trip in many ways, not least, of course, because there are two members of the royal family who weren't there, Harry and Meghan. So let's get into the royal rundown. So, royal news update. Princess Charlotte is 11 years old this week, and her parents have released some lovely new photo and video, which tells you a lot about what's going on behind palace walls. Then it's time for Tea with Tom. And this week, I'm joined, as usual, by my old friend, Paula Froelich, who has unearthed some extraordinary and shocking details about the increasingly shady finances of the Invictus Games. And this week's Royal Roast, I'm coming for Prince William. According to reports this weekend, he's paying a couple of $1 million a year in tax. But wait till you find out what it's for. And our royal insider today is the formidable Alison Boshoff, the show business reporter for the Mail. And she has been busy with her stunning analysis of what's going on at the Palace of Montecito. Right, buckle up. And let's get into it. First on the agenda today, our royal news update. It's Princess Charlotte's 11th birthday, and the palace have released these charming photo and this charming video, professionally photographed. There won't be a repeat of the Photoshop incident, I can tell you. Professionally photographed by Matt Porteous. Very, very controlled. We see her on the beach playing cricket. It's the perfect, shiny, lovely Instagram post. Now, there's been some criticism. There was a very mean-spirited piece, I thought, in the Mail saying that, oh, this is the kind of stuff Meghan and Harry get up to when, I want my royals to be more stuffy and stuck up, basically, seemed to be the message of the piece. I mean, I would completely disagree. I think that if William and Catherine want to communicate with the, younger generation who are going to be their subjects when they become king and queen, and indeed to Charlotte's contemporaries, they need to be all over Instagram. They need to be communicating in this language. And I think what we're seeing is that although they're perhaps not naturally fluent in the language, they're hiring people who are naturally fluent in the language, and it's really working. Now, the other thing that's so interesting, I think, about this is the massive difference towards the Sussex approach. And that's the other thing I thought this, as I said, rather mean-spirited article in the Mail saying, oh, it's very like Meghan and Harry. Well, it's not actually, is it? It's the complete opposite, because we're seeing the kids' faces. We know what they look like. It's not being hidden from us. And of course, what this has done is it has removed the profit incentive for paparazzi to snap them. Like a photograph of Charlotte or George is now worth almost nothing because we have so many wonderful photographs of them put out by their parents, by the institution, and by the machine in a very managed, carefully controlled way where they're able to completely be on top of their own image. As a result of this, those kids have a pretty normal life. I know other parents whose kids are at the same schools as them. They do a lot of sport. William and Catherine show up on the sideline and support and cheer them. They go to birthday parties. In fact, one friend of mine who was invited to a birthday party at the house said, you know, what's terribly funny is that if you go to any of our houses for a birthday party, we'd hire a children's entertainer and we'd be sitting in the summer house, drinking a glass of rosé while the children's entertainer got on with looking after the kids for 3 hours. But you go round there for the birthday party and there's no children's entertainer in sight. It's William and Catherine organising the games of rounders, which is a kind of kiddie version of baseball that's very popular in the UK amongst certain sections of the upper middle class. And the parents all have to join in and muck in, so there's no sitting around in the summer house having a glass of bubbly. The point is that by letting us know a bit about the children and being able to control it, and by showing their faces, William and Catherine are, in my opinion, absolutely acing it in the PR game as a family, because we feel like we know them enough, but we also feel like we don't feel grubby when we look at those pictures because they're being given to us in a spirit of respectful friendliness, and I think they're accepted in that way. Whereas I think with the Sussexes, the way the children's faces are hidden, it's almost like you're being made to feel guilty for looking at the picture of them, because it's like their parents are saying, our children are being exposed and exploited and we don't want you to see their face. And it's like, well, who's actually putting them on Instagram in the first place? There's a massive concept in the media and in the kind of clickbait culture these days known as the curiosity gap, right? And you'll see it the whole time on, X or Instagram. Find out what happened next. What did this incredible thing do to, et cetera, where you're told what it is, but it leaves this curiosity gap and you have to click through to find out the answer to the question. And in a way, that's exactly what Meghan is doing by endlessly showing us the kids at these different angles and these different perspectives. It's creating curiosity to build interest in them as a brand. And I'm actually going to talk about this a little bit later, not in great depth, but I'm going to talk about it a little bit with my guest, Alison Boshoff, who is coming on the show in a bit. Charlotte's photo isn't just sweet, it's strategic. I think that the Waleses get it. I think they understand what they are trying to do. I think they are all over their media operation. And I think the Sussex media operation, frankly, is floundering. Well, now it's time for Tea with Tom with my old chum, Paula Froelich. Back with me, my old chum, Paula Froelich. Paula, you've been writing on your fantastic Substack, Paula Froelich Uncensored, quite a lot about the Invictus Games. Why has this subject caught your attention again, and what have you found out?
Well, I always thought, Tom, to be fair, that if I was going to give one dime of a dollar to anyone, I should know where it went. I am a huge believer in looking at tax returns, especially for charities. Also, the fact that Harry and Meghan on their People magazine cover exclusive said that Harry is now doing what he is born to do. And he seems to think that's charity, which is great. I'm down with it. But, his charities, when he was with the royal family, it was all well and good. It was run perfectly and smoothly. But since he left the royal family, there have been a lot of issues. Archwell had to shut down. Then Sentabali had to shut down. Sentabali is now suing Harry for defamation. There were also issues with Africa Parks. There's a huge investigation going on after it was found that Africa Parks rangers did, in fact, rape local tribes people in places like the Congo. And the only thing he really seems to have left is the Invictus Games. But Tom, there's a lot of questions to be asked about these games.
It's certainly a notable how Harry's charitable endeavors have really just run into problem after problem after problem since leaving the royal family without that kind of backup and support and maybe that element of professionalization that the family was able to bring. Invictus, of course, we've got the 1 year to go event coming up in July, so it's going to be very much in the headlines. I mean, one of the things you found out was the astonishing kind of collapse in what the charity is actually doing, right, Paula?
Absolutely. So we'll get to Birmingham in a minute because there are major issues with Birmingham. And the major reason that Harry is actually going to Birmingham is to drum up business and support because it has just disappeared. So if we look at Birmingham in the past, and the most recent one was the one in Vancouver. All right. They had raised $63.2 million. Now, 30 million of that came from Canada and British Columbia governments. So it's basically came out of the British taxpayers' pockets. All right. There were 534 competitors. That is it. So basically, if you do the math, they cost per competitor was $118,352. It's wild. Now, the other issue is the grants to veterans were cut by a whopping 63%, Tom, and reserves grew to $2.3 million pounds, and they were also paying people 130,000 pounds, which is the very top, over the top of salaries. So, where is this money going to? Why is this happening? In Canada, they had 44 corporate sponsors, including Boeing. Now, in Birmingham, they only have 11, and they are all anonymous. This is a massive problem. So the money's not there. People are really angry because as you and I have talked about it before, Birmingham just got out of bankruptcy and they still can't pick up the trash on the streets.
Yeah, it's astonishing. And Paula did a fantastic deep dive on this with Rachel, the Curious Pilot, better known to some of us as the creator of the Montecito minimalist brand. So if you want to get really stuck into this, look at Paula's longer YouTube. This is maybe the highlights reel, Paula. So without burying people too much in the numbers, although the numbers obviously are incredibly important, um, what basically, in a nutshell, has gone wrong at this flagship charity that was so important to Harry, that is in fact has such tremendous goodwill, really, from people, just in a general sense. Like, how has it all gone so bad?
Well, I think a lot of people are saying, why do you need so much money for so few competitors? What exactly and where does the money go to? Where is it from? How much are you paying people? And why are the wounded warriors not really getting that much out of this? When you look at comparable games that do things like Germany has its own Invictus style games. They spend $200,000, 200,000 euros on this. You look at the Wounded Warrior games in the US, they spend 2 million. These are pennies on the dollar compared to what Harry is raising, but we don't actually see the proof in the pudding, if you know what I mean. That is the problem. Why is it so expensive? Where is the money going?
And Tom Bauer, of course, wrote a lot about the Invictus Games in his recent book. And we had Tom on, and he said that Harry seems to be, in his impression, using the games really for his own ends to sort of force a meeting with the king, really, in Birmingham next year, because Harry's coming to Birmingham this year to do a 1 year to go event, but then the actual games themselves take place next year. The king is going to be invited to open the games on the stage with Harry. Head of states have done this in other countries. Tom Bauer seems pretty adamant that King Charles won't do it, not least for fear of offending Prince William. But it is going to be very, very strange. We're going to have Harry back in England for potentially as much as a week, potentially longer in July, going around doing charity events, positioning himself very much as a royal. And that's the other thing I wanted to ask you about, Paula. It seems to me that this charity was originally set up as a kind of royal charity, right? And now it seems to be represented by somebody who seems to spend all their time tearing down, attacking, and trying to damage the royals. So it can hardly be encouraging for donors, can it?
No, and in fact, as we've discussed with Sentabali, and part of the problem, Dr. Sophie Chandaka did a brand assessment, and it came back that Harry was, while he was head of Sentabali, he was their biggest liability as well. So was Meghan. And I think that a lot of people are not interested in donating to something that Harry is the head of, not least of all because, again, where is the money going? And the shine seems to have come off this very worthy cause. And Harry is using it kind of as his own PR firm. Look, I do the Invictus games. Look, I support Warriors, which, again, great. However, there are a lot of other places that do this and they do it better and they have better results and their money is all accounted for.
We had, of course, with Sentabale, we had this extraordinary, very public whistleblowing by Sophie Chandauka, literally saying, I objected. I told them that I was not there to be part of the Sussex PR machine. And Paula, you've reported a lot about the staffing problems coming up for Birmingham, the fact that key posts remain unfilled 1 year out. I mean, it's almost unimaginable if an event of this scale would still be trying to fill key posts at this stage. What can you tell us about that?
So I did write for NewsNation a really extraordinary story where I spoke to people who had been contacted by headhunters for the games in Birmingham and for the overall umbrella Invictus Games Foundation. And of course, at first they wouldn't say who it was for. They described the role, and it was for head of marketing, which is a major position. And finally, one of the people said, "Is this for Invictus Games?" They said, "We can." They said, "Is Prince Harry involved?" And they said, "Well," and she goes, "Because if he is, I am not interested. My reputation is also at stake." And they did not call her back.
And you dug into the structure of Invictus a little bit. Tell us about the slightly curious way it's structured with these kind of satellite offices and the licensing fees and all these things that sound a bit strange.
Yes, it is a bit strange. So you had the overall umbrella of the Invictus Games Foundation. Then you have the individual city games, and they have a licensing fee that they license from the overall over from the Invictus Games Foundation, the umbrella, and that is redacted how much it is. So Maxwell and I were discussing the redactions that were abounding in the Canada games. And there were a lot of them. And it was fascinating because this is supposed to be completely transparent, but you're giving pages out to the public that literally look like a CIA document. Not to mention, how much is your licensing fee that you're licensing from your parent? And where does that money go?
Yeah, it certainly seemed like a very strangely shady. You'd think, my goodness, this is a charity. Do you really need to be redacting details? What are you so worried about? It just seems hard to imagine a world in which it would be commercially sensitive if this is indeed, a charity.
The other issue is, Tom, people are very concerned that Meghan is going to show up either this summer or next summer and shill her trauma closet. Basically, not wear Invictus gear as she should. Because if you're trying to raise money for Invictus, do you not want to wear Invictus gear at all times and have people maybe buy it?
Yeah, exactly. Paula, you are such a bloodhound. We love having you on. Thank you so much. As I say, if you want to hear more about this in depth, Paula has done a longer video about it on her YouTube channel, which is called
Paula Froelich Uncensored, but you can just go to at Paula Froelich on YouTube or Paula Froelich Uncensored on Substack. You can read about it, you can watch it. I have all the links. You guys can do your own digging.
Paula and I had a great deal of fun last week. I was in New York. It was brilliant to hang out with Paula for the first time in a couple of years. We had some interesting drinks, didn't we, with some various different people. Though I tried to go out for dinner with Paula, but she had a better offer, so she bounced me. She
I did
86'd me.
not. I did
You
not.
totally
Tom
did.
Tom didn't tell me he was coming in for a week.
I was like, let's go for dinner after your show. I came in, I did your show, your fantastic show on NewsNation. I was like, you were like, let's go for dinner afterwards. And then at the end, you were like, oh, sorry, I can't go with you. I've got to go with someone else more important than you.
No, not more important. I had just double booked. And Tom did not really tell me he was coming in till like a week before. So
That's true. It might have even been 3 days before. I did forget to tell everybody I was coming to New York. And Paula would never break a commitment. And it was lovely to see you, Paula. And we had a really good time. It was really fun. And
I love you very much, Tom. You're my brother from another mother. And lobsters unite.
And it was nice to meet Doug.
Oh, yes, exactly. The little hairy turd bird. He's the best.
Paula Froelich, thank you so much.
Thanks, Tom. Love you.
Now it's time for our Royal Roast. In my sights this week is Prince William, who I think is making a huge mistake by not being transparent about his finances. Now, there was a report in the Sunday Times this weekend saying that William pays around about $7 million in income tax every year. This puts him in the top tiny 0.002% of UK taxpayers. The income is generated, of course, by the Duchy of Cornwall, the vast land holdings all over the United Kingdom, encompassing land, encompassing foreshores, encompassing beaches, encompassing rivers, encompassing all kinds of things, factories built on them. Dartmoor Prison is one of the assets that is generating revenue for William. But now, according to the Constitution, the royals are not required, the king and the heir to the throne, the Prince of Wales, are not required to pay income tax. The Queen broke the convention when she began paying income tax voluntarily after the fire at Windsor Castle, because Windsor Castle was essentially a private residence, but it was restored on the state's dime, as it were. So in recognition of that, the Queen voluntarily started paying income tax. The tradition then, Prince Charles, as the heir to the throne, was paying income tax, and tax returns were made in the normal manner. So we knew how much tax Charles was paying. Now, unfortunately, since Charles came to the throne, he stopped making that full declaration of what his income tax is. And William has never declared his income tax. So this $7 million figure that was quoted in the Sunday Times at the weekend is not actually an official figure. It's actually the Sunday Times's best kind of estimate, guess, call it what you want. I do note that the palace seemed to be tipping them the wink that they were roughly correct, but we actually have no idea what amount of tax for a fact that William is paying. I mean, it may well be around about $7 million a year. It may be a great deal less than that, or it may be a great deal more than that. And the problem is he's resisted the call for transparency for years. I just don't think that the royal family at the moment is in a position to resist calls for transparency and accountability. And I think it's a huge mistake. This reform is coming to the tolerance of the British public for their affairs to be completely shrouded in secrecy. Royal wills are not allowed to be seen by the public for 100 years. Well, everybody else's will in the United Kingdom is a matter of public record. It's ridiculous that they are given all of these special privileges, and it is very dangerous for the perception that it creates, that it's one rule for them and one rule for the others. Now, a lot of the controversy around William's income is where the money actually comes from. And it's the land holdings of the duchy. And because it sounds like this huge amorphous body, but of course, actually, it affects all these tiny little individual people who are getting on with their own lives, who are paying rent to Prince William. And even more than the individual people who, occasionally there'll be a story in the Mail of some tenant farmer who's had his rent raised by a significant amount, to line Prince William's pockets is the way that it's portrayed. But there are a lot of public bodies that are paying rent to the Duchy of Cornwall. They included lifeboat stations, town halls, school playing fields. And a lot of these were stopped after Channel 4 and the Sunday Times did a big investigation last year. But there are still some very significant red flags, shall we say, the most obvious of which is Dartmoor Prison. So William owns the land on which Dartmoor Prison is built. He collects around about $1.5 million a year on the lease for Dartmoor Prison, and Dartmoor Prison is empty. And the reason that Dartmoor Prison is empty is because it has dangerous levels of a toxic gas called radon, which of course is very much associated with the kind of granite rock that you get on Dartmoor, which is an area in the southwest of England. So the prison operated, for the benefit of the state, built on land owned by the Prince of Wales, which many people would argue is actually owned by the state, and that the ownership structure of Duchy of Cornwall is all wrong. He's collecting 1.5 million a year for that. Now, Prince William, if you can't see that that is not only wrong, but also foolish, then I'm afraid you are very deserving of being the subject of today's Royal Roast. And now it is time for the big attraction, my Royal Insider. Yes, well, Royalists, now it's time for our Royal Insider. And following in the steps of the magnificent guests that we have brought you over the first 2 months of this podcast, I'm delighted to say that today I have joining me none other than the crack Daily Mail showbiz reporter, Alison Boshoff. Alison, welcome.
Thank you, Tom.
I've always felt a kinship with Alison because when I was a cub reporter at the Daily Telegraph, I sat in Alison's desk. She'd just left and gone to the Mail, and I sat in your desk, Alison, at the Daily Telegraph. How about that?
Well, that is something, isn't it? Was that, I suppose, I'm trying to think who would have been there and who might have left by that time. None of it's exciting to your viewers and listeners, so we don't need to go down that one, do we?
Well, it is actually, because actually there's another very prominent reporter who sat opposite me was Tommy Leonard.
Oh, Mr. Leonard. Yeah. And then he took over as media correspondent, which is the posh word for showbiz, which is what I do at the Telegraph. Fancy. I joined the Telegraph from the Sun, and they were all completely agog as to who this creature might be. And I remember Sarah Sands had tried to calm everyone down by saying that my parents read the Daily Telegraph, and it was actually a complete lie. She was trying to reassure them that this woman who was joining from the Sun wasn't going to be too terrible. Anyway, fine. Snobbery.
And I'll tell you another amazing fact, which is that the viewers of this podcast will know my sister Plum Sykes, who does our fashion for us when we can afford her. And Alison, you went to school with Plum, right?
I did go to school with Plum. We were both Wally Hall girls, yeah, in our little, very fetching. Do you remember the brown V-neck with the yellow stripe? Yeah, and the brown blazer. I haven't been able to wear brown since. Yeah, and then actually Plum and I were both at Oxford at the same time as well. And she once asked me to walk in one of her fashion shows, and I refused. So long ago this was, Tom, that she actually asked me by sending me a letter to my home address. That's how old I am.
That's very cool. Well, last night, of course, Monday night was the Met Gala, the biggest night on fashion's calendar. One person who wasn't there, but we suspect would have very much liked to be there, was Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex. Alison has written an extraordinary bombshell story for the Daily Mail that's been leading news feeds all over the world for the past 3 days. A real forensic inside look at the Sussex operation. It's the kind of story that Alison totally specialises in. Alison, I suppose the fashion angle is as good a place as any to start as we talk about this amazing report that you've done this weekend. You seem to be saying in your piece that Meghan had basically picked the wrong side and had got herself into Anna Wintour's bad books, shall we say?
Yes, and I do think it's probably quite easy to get yourself into Anna Wintour's bad books. I mean, let's be fair to Meghan. I know she's not everyone's cup of tea, but there are a lot of people out there who Anna Wintour doesn't like, and then the whole manner of Megxit and what they said to the royal family is really the opposite of what Anna Wintour stands for as a person and as a Brit and as a Brit abroad. And I'm thinking about when she famously, for the no one could believe their eyes, the Queen attended a fashion show and Anna Wintour sat next to her, and Anna Wintour had made that happen. So Anna Wintour is an absolutely staunch royalist, extremely keen on dignity. She's not going to be going on some kind of grubby Netflix tell-all, pretending to curtsy and thinking that's funny. That is not cool.
No, it's certainly not. And but Meghan, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I have heard on the grapevine that when she, and not on the grapevine, I mean it's a matter of record that when she wears stuff, it often sells out. She has this influence in the fashion world, and yet it doesn't quite seem to translate to sort of chicness or coolness, does it? Or being part of the in crowd. And it's, I suppose, a different thing to sell out, a thing that you wear is different to being part of the in crowd, basically.
Well, it's a question of who is buying, how many people are buying, and what are they buying. I mean, I think what you want to look at here will be something like Michelle Obama and her incredible selling power when she was First Lady. And I was just looking this up this afternoon. So when she was First Lady, it's reckoned that she sold around $3 billion worth of merchandise as a result of her wearing it. But she did not make a penny. And this is really crucial, okay? This is somebody who proudly wore American clothes. She wore, oh my God, how many hundreds of J. Crew cardigans. And people would go out and buy them. And this was a demonstration of her power, but she used that power because it was power which came with the office of being First Lady, as much as Meghan's status comes from who she's married to. That Michelle Obama never chose to cash in on that. And that was kind of part of the prestige of it. Because if you want someone to aspire to look like you as you execute your wonderful ceremonial duties, then you don't want to be seen at the same time to be sort of grubbing around saying, buy this T-shirt for $17.99. That is not, it's incompatible.
Yes. So Alison's piece for the Mail this weekend, I'm sure, of course, you all will have read it. If you read my Substack, you will have been linked and directed to it. My Substack is called The Royalist. And if you read that, I did a big story about this at the weekend. It got me almost as many subscriptions as it got you, I think, Alison. It's a fantastic story. And it's headlined with a quote from an insider saying, "They've lost the plot. She's spiraling badly." And the headline is how Meghan and Harry have burned all their bridges as insiders reveal their spectacular fallout with Anna Wintour and Kardashians, money woes, and problems that are worse than anyone realizes. And I suppose what I find fascinating about this story is the money issue. And I'll tell you one thing that I was told. I was in New York last week, and I was meeting with somebody who lives fairly near them. And they said to me that the house that they occupy in Montecito is like a sort of laughing stock. It's kind of shameful because, of course, in America, if you're a billionaire and you buy a house for $14 million, I mean, what's the first thing you do? Knock it down, or at the very least, remodel it, and there they are still sort of padding around in a kitchen that looks straight out of the Olive Garden, circa 1994. And you say in this piece that they'd very much hoped that fashion would be a key revenue stream for Meghan. Is that to do with the one-off platform that she's investing in, or was it? And you talk also about this J. Crew deal that she tried to do, which seems a bit of a come down anyway. But obviously, the Chanels and the Pradas and the Diors and the Balenciagas don't want her to be an ambassador for their brands.
I think she had several options starting out as a newlywed in the world of fashion, because she's a stylish young woman. She looks great in clothes. She is interested in clothes and in fashion. And she'd had a range at the department store Reitman's of kind of, office wear, a bit like what she wore in Suits, nice little pencil skirts and jumpers and so forth. So that was a possibility for her. Fashion was always a possibility. And actually, when she was discussing at the Forbes magazine, was it Fortune? And she was talking about her As Ever range, and she said, which is the lifestyle, the jams and so on. And she said, oh, well, it was always more natural for me to move into fashion. So, okay, what can you do in fashion? Okay, first of all, you could have your own clothing line. Never do this. As the saying goes, how do you make a small fortune in fashion? Answer, start off with a large one. So that was never going to be a go for her. They just don't have the money to start her own fashion line. So in which case you're left with endorsements. Endorsements are kind of cheap. It's fine, isn't it, to have a line somewhere, Kate Moss does Topshop, Stella McCartney does H&M, Victoria Beckham does Mango or Gap or whatever. But these people are all actually designers, so they're bringing something to it. So I suspect that she wouldn't, that's where she might get an offer, but also it's pretty exposing because someone's going to have to design the clothes for her. So what else can you do? You could be a brand ambassador. This is tremendous. Balenciaga, and she did go to the Balenciaga fashion show in October. She invited herself. They've just announced 11 new ambassadors, not her. That was in February. Winona Ryder, Harris Dickinson. It's great for Winona Ryder. She's being paid £500,000 to do Stranger Things. She gets another £500,000 from Balenciaga. Jobs are good, and thanks very much. Meghan isn't getting offered that. That's good money. The other great thing which she really likes to do, which would be the best possible for her, in my opinion, would be to be a brand ambassador, but also to have a slice of the cheese. So it'd be a small brand and you'd invest in it so that when they sell, you get a bit of it, like she did with Clever Blends, the matcha tea. By the way, hasn't that disappeared since she started doing her own tea? So that would have been good for her, but none of these things have taken off. So she's reduced to doing this Shop My version called One Off. It's possible she could get possibly $20,000 a month in an amazing month. Maybe this month she'll do it. Generally, even the top creators get more like $5,000 a month. I mean, honestly, she's not going to have enough money to put in that new kitchen in her Taco Bell mansion ever at this rate.
I mean, they're such tiny sums, aren't they? And it was interesting when you looked at the Australia tour. I mean, you didn't have to have any information leaked to you. You could just see that 300 people, they didn't even manage to sell all the tickets. Imagine you had 300 people paying, $2,000 each, and say she was getting half of it, and then a few expenses and what have you. I mean, maybe if it all went really well, maybe she made 300 grand from that trip to Australia. But like that to you and I, as obviously would be not bad for a week's work, but it's not a lot in Montecito. It's not a lot in the world that they want to move in. And there's some other reporting around last weekend saying that their staff have gone from 16 to 5, although laughably, they both each still have a chief of staff. But I don't know what the chief, who is the chief of staff the chief of? That's what I want to know. But
It must be so frustrating. You want to boss someone around and it's only you.
maybe they could create some AI bots that they could boss around.
The staff is tiny now, but it has to be because there's no money. But, but coming back to that tour, I think the tours are a loss maker for them because the money it costs in security, which they pay for, because they proudly say they'll pay for it, is way less than the money that they're making from the commercial, the commercial activity, way less. In fact, the Tom Bower book said, and I think it may well be the case, that George Soros's charity underwrote their tour to Colombia, and it cost $4 million to send them there for a week. Yeah. Australia won't be much different. So if Harry's picking up 50K to speak and Meghan's picking up, 300 max, I would say probably more like half that. This just is not, this is a basket case economy that they're running here.
So I suppose that comes back to then, the interesting question then is, why are they doing it? My theory on why they're doing it is because they want to try and undo Mexit. They want to undo the Sandringham Summit. They want to position themselves as royals because they know that ultimately the big payday only comes if they are perceived as a member of the royal family. We had Harry last week saying that he was still a working royal, despite what you may have thought, Alison. He is still a working royal.
Yeah.
Do you think that is correct? And also in your piece, you say that Meghan is spiraling. What exactly do you mean by that? And what are your sources telling you about her mental state and the happiness of the couple?
Okay, fine. Well, let's take Harry and the working royal bit first. So the problem is, whether you call it royal or not, what Harry and Meghan want to do, which suits their own needs, is to be perceived as people of high moral rectitude and high value to the world, like on a sort of presidential level. Okay, so in which case, what they want to be is a philanthropist, when you can only be a philanthropist if you're a billionaire, because the essence of being a philanthropist is you've got so much money, you don't know what to do with it, and you're just going to give it away. So you can't be a philanthropist if you haven't got the cash. So all of their issues and problems, as far from where I'm sitting, are because they want to be a philanthropist and be Lord and Lady Bountiful, handing out the cash, and they don't have any cash. So what they've got to do is perform this dance where somebody gives them the money via Archewell, and they then, very ostentatiously hand it out in very small sums for a very long period of time to do some very conspicuous good works. Now, listen, I'm not knocking anybody who wants to do good works. Let's be clear that, intentions may be pure. However, you can't be a philanthropist if you don't have billions to spend. Okay, so in terms of spiraling, what my person was talking about was this sense of momentum without direction. Okay, so this is someone who's very busy, extremely active in a number of different areas, and yet it's scattergun. It's one month I'm on the cover of Harper's Bazaar. I'm not really discussing actually my lifestyle brand at all. I don't even mention my upcoming, at that point, holiday special TV show. Not even mentioned. So I'm not a TV star. I'm not mentioned that I've just done an acting job, my first in years. No, I'm in the fashion space. And then, a couple of months before, suddenly we're all very surprised. She's making a cameo as herself. Well, it's not really acting, in some Amazon movie. Okay, fine. But does she now want to be an actress? Where's the next acting job then? Or, she's insisting that Netflix release a statement saying they do really love her, actually, and there is going to be this Polo scripted documentary. But, but which is it? Are you a TV producer? Are you an actress? Are you a fashionista? Are you a businesswoman? You can try and be all of those, but they have to be successful. There has to be follow through. And so what's happening with her is I do think it's the lack of not having an agent that's really, really hampering her here. So you're a film producer, who'd you go to say, I want her to be in my next movie. I would like her to endorse my brand of, sneakers. Who's doing the deals for her? Nobody. She's got her lawyer, same lawyer she's had since pre-Harry. And there's, she's sacked everyone at the charity. I mean, she's kind of out of staff. So there's no one to advise and help. So what I'm being told is there is this, as I say, momentum without direction where it's just, what's going to stick. Oh, I'll try that. Oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And no one's saying to her, well, look, why don't you just do as ever for 6 months and just make that work? And then let's do acting, or then let's do TV producing.
Polo 2 is the triumph of hope over experience. And it was really interesting when it was announced, because we actually had Matt Donnelly on this show, who's the reporter from Variety, who did that amazing piece in Variety, which Polo 2 was basically announced in reaction to.
His
And
amazing piece.
And it was basically, they released it basically to discredit his story, to say that his story was rubbish. Like, they were briefing left and right. Matt Donnelly doesn't know what he's talking about. He's only been like chief correspondent of Variety for 7 years. This guy doesn't have, doesn't know anyone in this town like we do. And, but, Matt had this incredible revelation that Polo 2 project had been sitting on the shelf for well over 2 years. And then they just pulled it out the bag and like, oh yeah, we love you guys, as you say, to show, we love you really. What reports do you get about how the decline in the business is affecting the relationship? Do you know anything about that?
You hear different things from different people, but that is one of the things that you hear, is that there is tension over the children. And, she's, it's almost like, it's like grandmother's footsteps, that old parlor game where you turn round and someone takes a little couple of steps forward and then you try and catch them moving. And she's doing that on Instagram, isn't she? So you've got Lily from this angle, then you've got Archie from this angle, and you think, well, sooner or later, it's just by degrees, isn't it? And you think, why are we not being a little bit more binary? Either the children are protected or the children aren't. But instead, we're in a very Sussex way going down some kind of confusing middle road. And people say it's because, Harry doesn't want the kids to be used. One of the things they did say, over Mexit was the ghastliness of having to serve up your newborn on the steps of the hospital, the awfulness of, on the child's first day of school, you'll have to let the Royal Rota take a picture of them. I mean, honestly, it doesn't seem like such a terrible thing. That's a component of being royal, and they rejected it. So then if you then start shilling them out on a weekly basis on your Instagram to sell more scented candles, it does look a bit rum, doesn't it?
It certainly does. Rum would be one word, Alison. You have a great quote and information from sources in this story. One of your sources is telling you that one of the big problems they have is that they just, everybody who can help them, they either burn the bridge, or they're rude to them, or they offend them, like the Kardashians, or even the Bezoses, and of course we've talked about the Anna Wintour and the Edward Enninful situation, but tell me more about this sense that there's sort of running out of people prepared to put up with them, I suppose, because that's the impression I got from reading your piece.
Yeah, it is bad, isn't it? I think it's partly because they care so much about what's said about them. And they care so much about public opinion of them and trying to turn that tanker around, that they become impossible to deal with. So Netflix, for instance, they got invited to that beef tastemaker event for the show Beef, and that was directly in the wake of the Variety reporting. And obviously, all involved wanted to get pictures of Meghan with Ted Sarandos and his wife Nicole and Bella Bajario or anyone else at Netflix, just looking, like they were still in the fold. That was the aim of that. And Netflix took a full 24 hours, which is really unusual, according to my friends at Getty, to approve the pictures for release. So Netflix really took care. And this is a private event, but it's also a public one because it's being done to show something, to show that they're still loved at Netflix. And then, mysteriously, within 12 hours of them going up, whoopsie, they've all the ones of Meghan bar one image have come down. Why? Clearly because she didn't like them. She didn't like the way it made her look. It made her look desperate and clingy. People were laughing at her again online. We come back to this insistence of hers on being the victim, on trolling, on how awful things have been for her. I mean, you just look at how someone who's successful in the space deals with it, like Kim Kardashian. Do you think Kim Kardashian wasn't trolled for decades about her sex tape? Do you think she isn't still trolled for it now? Do we think Meghan really has it worse than Kim Kardashian? It's really hard to believe, and yet she thinks that she does. So if you're kind of thin-skinned, it's really difficult because Netflix have tried to do a good thing, tried to stand up for her, then it's come round, bitten them on the backside, and then it's a mess. So now they're not going to want to deal with her anymore. So they've tried to make nice, and the Sussexes have just made it impossible.
It was such an extraordinary mess, that Getty Images thing, wasn't it? Meghan looked like she was sort of gripping on to Nicole Avant, Ted Sarandos' wife. Is that correct? And she was
Yes, I mean, she had her hands literally around this woman's face and looked as if she wanted to just kind of leap in and give her, a kind of Scarlett O'Hara kind of kiss. It was like just before the end of Gone with the Wind, let me take you in my arms. It was very, I mean, it was kind of a full body cling. Yeah.
Well, Rachel, our producer, obviously won't be able to show any pictures of that on the screen because they've been taken down, apparently, at the request of somebody.
Tom, if only you and I were in the studio together, we could do a reenactment. That's what we need to do. Next time.
You also have a very damning line from an insider that the Kardashians are over them. It's kind of horrific, the fallout. I mean, the one people you don't want to fall out with if you're starting a brand that exists basically on the social media space, on Instagram. I mean, that is Meghan's shopfront. One person who could be very handy to help you would be the Kardashian family. They got into this ridiculous argument with them when they turned up at their party and claimed that they'd been asked, consent forms had been given out, and the Kardashians, I just rang the Kardashians rep and said, did you give out? And they said, no, we absolutely didn't give consent forms, and then, of course, they went on the podcast, on one of the Kardashian family podcasts, and the two sisters basically said that, they had wanted them taken down because it was the eve of Remembrance Day. They had said they said that they would never put stuff up against someone's explicit non-consent. They, saying that's not who we are, that's not what we do. I mean, it's no understatement to say that they have alienated some of the most powerful people in the social media firmament, if not arguably the most powerful, if you put them all together, all the Kardashians and the Jenners, right? I mean, it's a disaster.
Yeah. So Anna Wintour is the top of the tree for fashion. They've alienated her. Kardashians are the top of the tree for, social media. They've alienated them. And they just made themselves, I mean, it was slightly embarrassing, the optics of that party, and they made it 1,000 times worse. Okay, now. And then don't forget, they've also alienated Ari Emanuel, who is the top of the tree of Hollywood agents. And they then also alienated Ted Sarandos and the leadership at Netflix, which is, the richest streamer, which has won the streaming wars. So, that's pretty good going.
It certainly is. It certainly is. And then, of course, after all this, well, she then reshared an Instagram post saying that she was coming to the end of the 7 toughest years of her life. And it's tough, isn't it? I mean, hey, we all have tough years. But I wanted to also just get your take. Obviously, we had and Alison, thank you so much for giving us so much time. But I wanted to get your take on the King's visit. I thought it was a magnificent affair. I think the King did us proud as British citizens. I think most people were incredibly proud of the way he handled himself, his politeness, his charm, his respectfulness to President Trump, whilst at the same time making clear that, Britain wasn't entirely the US's lapdog. I thought it was very well handled. But it was extraordinary to think, wasn't it, if Meghan and Harry had just played their cards differently, if they'd done what the Queen had said and they'd been respectful and they hadn't given a load of interviews trashing the royal family. I mean, they would have been there, right? They would have, and you make the point that Guy Pelly was there, of all people.
Yeah, and also actually Rory McIlroy, who did the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge for Meghan. He was there with his wife. Yeah, I mean, everyone who's sort of come wafting past, 5 years ago, all the friends were there, but people also like sort of Charlotte Tilbury, all your Brits in America were there, and everyone was, they released some horrible, snippy statement that said something like, "Well, it's taxpayer funded, and we couldn't expect someone to make a side detour to see us. Wouldn't have been expected or appropriate or some such." And I thought, no, this is the King. Who's on a state visit and unwell, and you go see him. He doesn't have to come to Montecito to look around your kitchen. You go see him. No, I mean, but that just says everything, because they both have the belief that they're the main character. So maybe that's what the whole problem is with in all of these different spheres, is that there is belief that they are the main character. So when they come up against the person who actually is the main character, there's a conflict, which can only be resolved by the main character going, "No thanks."
It is extraordinary, isn't it, Alison, right? When you think about it, like 6 years ago, 7 years ago, what have you? Okay, let's say the day of Brexit, right? So whatever it is, the 6th of January, 2020, or whatever it is, actually, the deck of cards that they're holding is pretty good, right? At that stage, if you just imagine a world in which they'd completely taken the Queen's advice, right? They said, absolutely, we will not commercialize this. We'll take our not inconsiderable private fortune. We'll live off some, conservative investments. We'll live a reduced life and a private life, and we'll still be like this mini sub-brand of the royal family in the United States. Now, obviously, this is assuming everyone's characters are different and blah, blah. And I know all the reasons that this didn't happen or couldn't have happened or would be been very unlikely to have happened. But it's just interesting to think about how much more powerful and influential they would be now had they done what all those people advising them to do originally.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? And, hindsight's a wonderful thing. But I think what it's so easy to forget is how popular they were, how much we loved them. And I genuinely thought, well, the future's very bright for these guys. If they go to California, they're going to have a fantastic time. How fabulous. Sunshine and lollipops, as I always say to my children. That's what it's going to be. Sunshine and lollipops. But yeah, that's exactly what it should be. Everyone loved Harry. He seemed very lively. He wasn't this kind of sulky, vicious, bad-tempered creature who he now keeps on showing himself to be. "Oh, I've got to do this," or "How bloody awful," Yeah, and everyone thought she was beautiful, clever, accomplished, could do anything she wanted to turn her hand to. I mean, yes, if there'd only been a smidgen of reasonableness. Yeah.
And it's an extraordinary morality parable of our times. And Alison Boshoff is one of the principal chroniclers of it. You can read her stuff in the Mail. She is a absolutely key part of the fantastic coverage that the Mail have of the royals. Do you have any other, do you do any social media or Substacks or Instas or anything like that, Alison, or are you too busy for all that stuff?
Do you know, I'm just so lazy and old, Tom. That's my problem. I'm slightly involved in the Mail Showbiz Substack because actually I am showbiz. I only cover Harry and Meghan because our royal people found they couldn't do it because it was all about media and showbiz. So then I stepped in because it was, fell more happily in my patch. So, yeah.
Well, Alison, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute treat to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tom.
Well, that's all we have time for on The Royalist today. Thank you so much for spending your valuable time with us. We really, really appreciate it. It's so exciting to see how the podcast is growing, the enthusiasm from all of you, your incredible comments, and I'm just blown away. It's beyond my wildest dreams. I can't tell you how excited and how happy I am that we're building this fantastic community together. Look, thank you so much to everybody who's helped make today's show. Big thanks, of course, to Paula Froelich. Huge thanks to Alison Boshoff, and gigantic thanks to our producer, Rachel Passer. Don't forget, if you want to get more royal news, The Royalist on Substack is where you will find me for the written word. If you want more videos, make sure to follow my YouTube channel. And don't forget also to follow Paula's Substack and YouTube channels. Thanks very much, and we'll see you next week.